عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المذلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب يا مظلوم يا عطشان كربلاء. ما خاب من تمسك بكم ولمن من لجأ إليكم سادتي، يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق والأصدق القائلين: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون، آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على Perhaps there is nothing more that the human being loves nor desires than happiness and contentment. Regardless of what cultural background, what religion, what language that we speak, we are on this eternal quest for happiness and for joy and contentment in anything and in everything that we do. And throughout this quest, we realize consistently, day after day, that many a times that which we have set as the source or the objective of our happiness and contentment consistently fails us. There's a perception, for instance, that that which is found within this world is going to offer me more happiness and more contentment. If I have a little bit more money, if I drive a little bit of a faster car, if I live in a bit larger home, I will definitely be happy, until we get exactly that which we have been supplicating and desiring in dua from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And very quickly we realize that we want a little bit more money and a little bit faster of a car and a little bit bigger of a home. And we're on this consistent sort of treadmill during the course of our lives, seeking toward identifying that which will bring us this joy and this happiness and contentment. And as we know from the ayat of the Quran, from the traditions of the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them, these things cannot truly be attained if what we are seeking is that solely which is within this dunya. From a very young age, when we're children, we have this perception that the first time that I make $100, there's nobody who's going to be as rich as I. And then we realize $100 is actually not that much money. We tell ourselves that the day when I graduate college and I land that first job that pays me a bit more than minimum wage, and I'm going to be so happy. And we realize, wait a minute, I can barely afford to pay like my car insurance, let alone anything else that I want to purchase. That once I get this salary, once I drive this car, once I live in this neighborhood, consistently we are bound to disappointment because of this perception, again, that all of these physical and tangible things is that which is going to bring this happiness and contentment. Which is why in a hadith, I believe narrated from Imam Ali ibn Musa Rada, alayhi salatu wasalam, he states that this world is like drinking salt water. The more that you drink, the more thirsty that you get. In other words, for us to realize and understand, and for the tradition to be demonstrative that there's a lot more toward us finding those most primary, innate manifestations of happiness and of contentment and of justice and of joy that it is that we're seeking, that go well beyond the frame of this dunya. And that's why, amongst the most important things that we can do to reshift our framework, to totally take a look and find contentment and happiness and joy in things that go above and beyond this transient world, is by returning back toward those advices and those instructions and that guidance from the Lord of the worlds, Allah Azza wa Jal, and his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli. Because when we, for instance, are engrossed and we are drowning in the words of Allah Azza wa Jal within the Holy Quran, when we are spending time with the ahadith of the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them, what we realize is what? We realize that there's a sense of contentment and happiness that we are able to attain and acquire that go well beyond the physical manifestations that we're consistently chasing. Let me give you an example. We just concluded a few weeks back the month of Ramadan. And during the month of Ramadan, though we are abstaining from everything physical, food, drink, intimacy, sleep, all of these things for 14, 15, 16, 18, 20 hours a day, whatever it might be, throughout the course of that latter half of the month of Ramadan, how much happiness do we feel? How much joy do we feel? How much contentment do we feel? Unlike any other experience. Why? Because we realize that there's so much more to life than just the physical, that we had the impression that that is what is going to bring us that sense of happiness that we're consistently seeking. Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in that verse of the Holy Quran, what does He say? Regarding contentment, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. That with the remembrance of God, does your heart find satisfaction. And throughout the course of our lives, we go through these ups and downs, and we think again, and we believe that that is what is going to bring me that joy that I am seeking, only for us to be disappointed. Because at the end of it all, it's a process for us to realize and for us to actualize that that which can bring us that ultimate source of joy and happiness that we are seeking goes well above and beyond that which is visible on the surface. It requires internal and self-growth. It requires a sense of internal awakening, a sense of self-disclosure, whereby we are able to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know our purpose. We actualize and realize who we are. What is our objective during the 70 or 80 or 90 years that I'm present within this dunya? And again, we see that there's far more than that which is apparent to the eye. Which is why for today's discussion, insha'Allah ta'ala, in honor of the martyrdom of Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, alayhi salatu wassalam, I want to focus on notions of self-sacrifice and giving and speak to the subject within three different dimensions. The first dimension is in terms of understanding what it means toward being someone who sacrifices their self. The second dimension in terms of understanding the role of sincerity in giving out of ourselves. And thirdly and finally, manifestations of giving as determined and spoken to by Imam as-Sadiq, alayhi salatu wassalam. So let's get right into dimension number one. When it comes toward understanding who we are and what it means toward giving out of ourselves, in order to find this ultimate contentment that we're seeking, the most important thing in anything that we do is to recognize our positionality, so to say. It's like a term that many people often speak to in their careers, in the academy, so on and so forth. What is our positionality in the world? And when we understand it sort of from a very existential lens, it goes back to this really famous and beautiful hadith of the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The Messenger of God, he states, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He states, اغتنم خمسا قبل الخمس. He states, seize five before five. شبابك قبل هرمك وصحتك قبل سقمك. He says, seize five before five, your youth before your old age, your health before your illness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before your preoccupation, and your life before your death. In other words, recognize the privileges of your life today, because more likely than not tomorrow, you're not going to have them. And if we live every moment of our lives recounting our blessings, at the very least, we enter into a state of gratitude and recognition that with these blessings comes a sense of responsibility. Let me put it in perspective for us. When I remember how beautiful the sunny weather is on a day that it's raining, more likely than not, it's supposed to lead me toward a sense of recognition the next time that it's sunny outside, for me to be thankful to the creator of the sun. Make sense? What happens the majority of the time? The day when it's raining, we're complaining, like, where is the sun? And then when the sun comes out, we take for granted that the sun is out, oftentimes being forgetful of our responsibility to being in a state of gratitude to the creator of the sun. Or an easier example, that when we get sick, our temperature changes like half a degree. I'm sure there's a bunch of physicians in the room. Half a degree, right? Half a degree, and how ill can someone become? If you're 99.5 degrees, your body temperature, you feel terrible. You have body aches and you start coughing and sneezing and God knows what, right? You become ill for this little minor adjustment that takes place inside of your body. And we tell ourselves, man, like, I cannot wait until I'm a bit more healthy so I can appreciate all of the great things about being healthy. I can taste my food, I can go out, I can spend time with my family, friends, community, I don't have to sleep all day long, I even miss my job. What happens? The day that we feel better, we forgot about showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the days that we feel healthy. When it comes toward wealth, as the hadith of the Prophet states, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he says, spend your wealth before you lose it. We go through these ups and downs during the course of our lives. In fact, in a hadith really beautiful from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he states, "Ajibtu lil bakhil, yastajilu lil faqr alladhi minhu harab." He states, I am amazed at the one who is stingy, at the one who doesn't spend out of their wealth. Why? They're running toward the poverty that they're trying to run away from. How, Amir al-Mu'mineen? He says that they make money and they collect money and they sit on that money. They never spend it on themselves. They never spend it on their family. They never spend it on their community. And they accumulate and accumulate and accumulate because they're fearful of losing their wealth. And what's going to happen? They're going to die. And then what's going to happen to their money? Their children are going to inherit it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold them accountable. In the words of Imam Ali, he says that on the day of judgment, Allah will ask them that you should be held accountable with the wealthy. They'll say, what do you mean? I never had any money. He said, no, you did. You've never spent it. So you didn't enjoy dunya and you're not going to enjoy akhirah. In other words, my friends, what I'm trying to say, that when it comes toward recognizing our privileges in this part of the world, in our own lives, within our own selves, to recognize the blessings that we are surrounded by. Because true awareness of ourself allows for us to also give and be the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intended for us to be. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Which is why when we come toward all of these ayat of the whole Quran, that talk about charity, that talk about giving, that talk about self-sacrifice, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ, that you will never attain righteousness until you give out of that which you love the most. مَنْ جَاءَ بِالْحَسَنَةِ فَلَهُ أَشْرُ أَمْثَالِهَا, that the one who gives one, Allah multiplies it by 10. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَسَاسَةٌ, that they give out of themselves even if it means detriment to their own selves. Verse after verse, hadith after hadith, that speak to this notion of giving, that speak to this notion of self-sacrifice, so on and so forth. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always say, the one who gives charity and the ones who pray, ita az-zakat wa iqam as-salat? Again, consistently within our tradition, there's this central role on giving. Why? Why? For numerous reasons. Number one, in order to humble ourselves. In order to humble ourselves in front of the Lord of the worlds, such that we remind ourselves that what we have is not ours. And by the way, when we talk about giving, I promise you, it's not only talking about giving of your wealth, as we'll talk about in a little while. Giving out of your wealth, giving out of your time, giving out of yourself by your kind words, giving out of your ears by listening to someone else. All of these are different manifestations of zakat, and we have ahadith to back up the statement. In other words, my friends, the whole notion and the whole objective of giving is to fulfill our ultimate objective, which is to recognize who we are in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is to be an abased servant and slave in front of the Lord of the worlds, such that we are able to again then respond by truly actualizing that notion of happiness and contentment and joy. Which is why in that hadith from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam, he states, Ilahi ma abadtuka khawfan min narak, wala tama'an fi jannatik. Oh my Lord, I do not worship you out of fear of the fires of hell. Nor do I worship you out of hope in your paradise, but rather I worship you li'annaka ahlul lidhalik. But rather I worship you because you are worthy of worship. And in another line of poetry of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, Ilahi kafa bi izzan an akuna laka abda. He states, Oh Allah, it is my pride that I'm able to consider myself your servant. وَكَفَى بِفَخْرًا أَن تَكُونَ لِي رَبًّا. And it is my honor that I'm able to call you my Lord. إِلَهِ أَنْتَ كَمَا أُحِبُّ. You're exactly that which I love. فَاجْعَلْنِي كَمَا تُحِبُّ. So make me that which you love. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he demonstrates that true happiness and joy and contentment is through this notion of servitude and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which cannot be attained until we give out of ourselves, recognizing that that which is most meaningful toward God is that, again, which is within us, that which we have the capacity to do. Which brings me to this hadith from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. The Imam is posed by his companion Abu Basir. He states, Abu Basir, قُلْتُ لَهُ أَيُّ صَدَقَتِي أَفْضَلُ. Tell me, O grandson of the Messenger of God, which act of charity is the best? Listen, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he states, قَالْ جُحْدُ الْمُقِلِّ. He states the best charity is the one who gives with the most effort. Doesn't say X money, doesn't say this much time, doesn't say anything else. He says it's by measure of the effort that you give. Nothing to do with wealth, about the effort that we give in service. Let's open up one quick parenthesis for 1 second. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in this verse of the Quran that I mentioned before. He states, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. That you will not attain righteousness until you give out of that which you love the most. Very famous verse of the Quran. I'm sure every one of you have heard it dozens of times. That which we love far more. We love to sleep. We love to be comfortable. And we should take care of ourselves. No one is saying to exhaust yourself to the detriment of yourself. Get that. I understand that.
But at the end of the day, to push ourselves in some service, in some seeking of knowledge, in something meaningful, that's all about. Which is why when it comes toward the second dimension of the discussion, and again, as we're able to deduce from these ahadith of Imam Jaffer as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, there has to be this sense and care of being sincere in whatever it is that we give. Unless the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam states that the best of charity is that which is made with a sense of concerted effort through our wealth, through our time, through our presence, whatever it might be. Sincerity is so important. If we do something and we're not sincere in whatever it is that we do, more likely than not, it won't come and reach the fruition that we're seeking. I remember a long time ago when I was studying in the Islamic seminary, one of my teachers, he said that if you're not sincere in whatever it is that you're speaking, no one's going to listen to it as a general thing. You say something, and there'll be a million distractions that will allow for people to not pay attention to whatever it is that you're saying. Right? Is that fair to say? Even if you're having a conversation with somebody else, and you're not truly believing what it is that you're saying, you're not going to be able to convince them of anything. That's just the truth. Similarly, others can tell when you're putting in an effort in anything that you do versus when you're not putting in an effort. If you care about your job, if you're a manager and you have some employees, you know who cares about their job, who's putting in a sense of effort, who's being diligent, who's being sincere, who's remaining focused, whatever it might be, versus those who are not. It's obvious. You think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not know whether or not we're being sincere or not? We oftentimes see prayer as a burden, fasting as a burden, acts of charity as a burden, so on and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows if it's a burden or if it's not for us, or if we're sincere or if we're not. Which is why it requires a sense for us to take a look and perform some self-accountability during the course of the process. In other words, what? Look within ourselves, spend some time. Try to identify how I can purify these intentions of mine. On that day of the Battle of Khandaq, when Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, he leaves the tent in order to go to the middle of the battlefield against Amr bin Abd al-Amri. You all know the story. I'm not going to repeat the whole story. But what is the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, he states? He states, بَرَزَ الْإِيمَانِ كُلُّهُ عَلَى كُفْرٍ كُلُّهُ. He states the entirety of faith is standing against disbelief in its entirety. That famous episode takes place. He fights Amr bin Abd al-Amri. He takes him to the ground. The dust settles. We're going to fast forward to the end of the anecdote. What happens? The Imam alayhi salam is holding Dhul-Faqar in his right hand, about to strike Amr bin Abd al-Amri and send him to the fires of hell. And as that sword is about to strike him, what happens? The Imam alayhi salam drops the sword. He stands. He walks around a few times. Then he goes and he kills him. They rush to the Messenger of God, his companions. They say, "Oh Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was about to strike Amr bin Abd al-Amri, he dropped the sword. What happened if he had gotten up?" Amr bin Abd al-Amri, like the legend says, that he was to wrestle lions as a hobby. This man was no joke in terms of his craftsmanship, in terms of his ability with the sword. He's not a joke when it comes toward battle. What happened? Oh Rasulullah, why did Ali stop? He said, "Don't ask me, ask him." Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he enters back into the tent. They rush him, celebrate with him. They say, "Oh Ali, you're about to strike Amr bin Abd. You dropped your sword, you took a moment, you regathered yourself, you killed him, great. But what happens if he had gotten up? Why did you do that?" He states that when my sword was about to strike the enemy, he struck my face. And if I had struck him at that moment, I would have struck him out of my own anger. But Ali ibn Abi Talib only strikes out of the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, what does the Imam alayhi salam, what does the Messenger of God, he states, ضربت علي يوم الخندق أفضل من عبادة الثقلين, that the strike of Ali on the day of Khandaq was greater than the worship of all of humanity and all of the creations of Allah in that one moment. Why? Because when something is done solely out of the sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will undoubtedly pierce and reach the highest of heavens. Which is why the hadith from the Messenger of God states that the best of the one who gives is the one who gives with his right hand and left hand is with utter and absolute sincerity, knowing that that which you are doing is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which brings me then to the third dimension of the discussion. And that is how we can give. When it comes toward giving, like I said before, there is this perception that our zakat is solely in terms of our wealth. And wealth undoubtedly is really, really important. That through wealth, through power, and through that which we're able to accumulate collectively as a community, we're able to build the institutions that we need to. And that means not only the amount that we give, but also with, again, what sincerity that we give, because we believe in the Lord will multiply reward after reward for us, but more than that, will multiply blessing after blessing. What do I mean? You know, when you're sitting in like a company of people that you love, and you're having a meal with them, it doesn't matter how much food is on the table. There'll always be enough food because you're going to enjoy the company so much, and you're more than willing to give out of that which is on your own plate. A parent is more than happy to give food to their child. Why? Because they're willing to sacrifice that blessing that is on their plate in order for their child, and they will feel a lot more hungry if their child had not. They will feel satiated if their children are satiated. Why? I don't know how that works physically, but I know in the metaphysical realm, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed us with more capacity than we believe. And when it comes toward giving out of our wealth, it goes back to this notion of a juhd, a sense of diligence, and a sense of focus, and a sense of determination, that when we give for the right reason, with that sense of sincerity for the Lord of the worlds, walking in the footsteps of the best of creation, the institutions that will manifest from that good deed will allow for the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put it all together. So don't worry about the amount, but worry about the effort which we give with, and the happiness that we give with, and the sincerity through which we give with. That's far more important. But more important than giving out of our wealth, like I said before, is giving in other ways and other manners as well. When it comes toward the legacy of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, we know that he gave out of his knowledge, zakatul ilm and tanshura. As the hadith of the Imam alayhi salam states, that the tax of knowledge is to share it, is to distribute that to others. And you take a look and you see today, my friends, that if you open up Kitab al-Kafi of al-Kulayni, we have more than 16,000 hadith. More than 16,000 hadith. Kitab al-Kafi in its 8 volumes is larger than all of the 6 major Sunni encyclopedic books in this one text of ours. And the legacy that we have from the Prophet and from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, is absolutely incredible. Truly, it's incredible. Our job, and actually, like we said before, when we have a blessing, is to make sure that we're in a state of gratitude to it. But if we don't know what we should be grateful for, then we will never be in a state of gratitude for it. Which is why it's so important that we give out of ourselves, also by giving out of our time toward understanding and learning our religion. We say for the last however many years, yeah, like these books are like not accessible to us. They're not in English. No, they are. They are accessible. They are in English. You have translations available to us. Our job is to spend time, albeit 5 or 7 minutes a day, in reading and studying and in increasing our religious literacy. Because we can build all the institutions that we need to build, and we can spend all the money that we need to spend. But if we're not studying and learning our religion, we'll stay. Together, we have the privileges unlike anywhere else in this world. I don't know, but if I were to take a survey of people in this room, whether or not, for instance, they have a college degree, whether or not, for instance, they have a master's degree, whether or not they have a doctorate degree, just from spending enough time in this community as I have over the last year or so, I know that the community, alhamdulillah, is very educated. alhamdulillah, like does well for themselves. Now imagine if you can transfer that to any part of the world. In so many communities, they come to majalis like these ones because that's their only place of community. That's their source of their religious identity. All of these things are important. We have no concern, generally speaking, about paying our bills, or, for instance, about our safety on a day-to-day basis, like so many of our sisters and brothers in different parts of the Shia world have to think about on a day-to-day basis. But if we can't spend, sacrifice, give 5 minutes of ourselves toward reading the ahadith of Imam Jaffer ibn Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam in Kitab al-Kafi, or otherwise 5 minutes a day, imagine how transformative that would be. We spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes of recitation of Quran, 3-4 minutes in the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Just imagine what life would be like. Truly, it has the capacity to totally transform the way that you think in your life and its entirety. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, you flip through these ahadith and you find these companions of his Zarara ibn A'yun, Muhammad ibn Muslim, how much they dedicated toward learning the sciences of Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. And even beyond that, like many of you are familiar, the students of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, according to Al-Mufid and Kitab al-Irshad, amounted to 4,000. And 900 of these students, according to different historical reports, were the cream of their crop in whatever aspect of the sciences, social or natural sciences, in their communities. Which is why you have these personalities that often get quoted like that of Jabir ibn Hayyan, this sort of legend in terms of the natural sciences. He would state that everything that I learned was from Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq. What I'm trying to say, my friends, is that in our effort toward understanding how we spend our wealth, how we spend our time, how we give out of ourselves, if we're not sacrificing ourselves toward learning our religion and understanding our tradition, then we're not truly fulfilling the objectives that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intended from us. So when it comes toward giving, we can again give out of our wealth. We can give out of the knowledge that we do have. We can give out of our time for others in humanitarian projects and voluntary efforts, in understanding our own religion. But one of those things which we often fail to remember when it comes to our giving is in terms of giving the entirety of ourselves. Let me explain what this means for just a moment. That today, amongst the biggest challenges that people have in a day-to-day basis is in terms of navigating relationships, is in terms of understanding how we should truly function as spouses, as parents, as teachers, as children, as friends. And sort of this fabric of society has declined because of a lack of sort of sacrifice from oneself, and this consistent notion that I and the me and the self is the entirety of our process. Let me explain. We live in a world that's consistently dominated by images, no matter where you walk, that tells you to take care of yourself. You can't sort of get on a train in New York City or walk down a urban street anywhere in this country without being bombarded with images that tell you how you should feed yourself this type of food, that you should drink this type of drink, that you should live in this type of neighborhood, that you should drive this type of car, that you should just be you and do you, and who cares about anyone else because you only live once, like the young kids like to say. That's what life is about, and that's what everything and every image and every media outlet is pushing in front of our faces. Totally to the contrary of that which has been taught in the prophetic practice of the Messenger of God and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the state that you have to be a little bit more, that you have to give out of yourself once in a while. And when it comes toward giving out of oneself, one of the most important tools that we need to seek toward engaging in, as we learn from the life, practice, and the sunnah of the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them, is to give out of ourselves by listening once in a while. You know, there's this term some of you might be familiar with, known as active listening. Active listening means to be attentive to someone else, truly attentive, Not such that when we're conversing with them, we're thinking about how we should respond, but we're actually trying to hear their perspective, their opinion. You don't have to agree with them, but you have to listen and truly listen. And in sort of the chaplaincy world, we call this radical listening. Not only are you listening to what they're saying, but you are literally sort of isolating all devices. You're putting your eyes on the individual, and you're taking notes if you need to, and you're talking back some items such that you're able to truly understand what is there. You know how hard that is? You know how hard it is to listen and to not interject? You know what? People love to talk. And they love to tell you why they are right and why you're wrong. And in fact, nobody loves to be heard more than ourselves. Truly. Just let me sort of, not to belabor the point, I'm sorry, but it's important. Just open up one quick parenthesis, extend this just for a second. You ever went to somebody and asked them, like, hey man, like, how are you doing? They're like, yeah, like, a really tough day. Like, tell me about your tough day. They start telling you about how difficult their day was and so on and so forth and whatever. Only like 30 minutes later, after they've told you about their whole life story, and if you listen really attentively, they say like, hey, thank you so much for listening to everything that I told you. What did you do? You didn't do anything. All they did was want to talk about themselves, talk about their difficulty, talk about their hardship. And only thing that they needed was for someone to listen. And on the flip side, truly, sometimes sadaqah can be one word that we say. How many of you have ever had someone come to you and say like, hey, like, you're a really great person, I appreciate you. Or something even more simple, like, hey, you like look really great today. And all of a sudden, you could have had the worst day, but someone told you, hey, you look nice, that, you know, I appreciate you, and your perception on the entirety of the day changes. We're going through this consistently during the course of our lives. So why is it so hard for us to say nice things to people? Imagine what we can do to change someone's day. We could potentially change the whole world based on how their mood is, just by saying something like, hey, you look really nice today. Hey, I really appreciate you. Something to the smallest effect. When it comes toward the hadith of the Prophet Islam, when it comes toward this notion of giving, we see giving has so many different manifestations. And when we speak to this word sadaqah, zakat, all of these different terms and the way that they're understood, within our tradition, there are multiple different layers and dimensions. To give out of time, to give out of oneself, to hear, to speak a nice word. All of these are various manifestations that we take a look and that we're able to identify are amongst the mechanisms and means by which we show servitude, subservience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll conclude with this for tonight. When it comes toward Imām as-Sadiq, the 60 Imam of Ahlul Bayt, we realize, like I mentioned before, the amount of reports and knowledge that he has offered toward his community, that he has allowed for us to learn and benefit from, that are found within the books of ahadith and tradition. And it's so important for us to spend time like with these words of Imām as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, hadiths of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, even be it 5 or 6 or 7 minutes a day, not only because they have the ability to be so transformative, but you have to realize just how difficult it was for these ahadith to reach us, generation after generation, the struggle of the narrators, the followers, the companions, and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, what they had to do to protect these words of Ahlul Bayt. They would literally transcribe these ahadith of Allah and hide them and pass them down generationally to their children, who would pass them to their children. They would write them down on the back of the skins of animals, and they would do their best toward memorizing them, write them on leaves and on tree bark, bury them under their homes, do everything that they could to protect them, to the extent that that famous companion of Imam Ar-Rida alayhi salam, al-Jawad al-Kadhim, perhaps as well, Muhammad ibn Abi Umayyah, he would narrate tradition after tradition from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them. And it is stated that the Abbasid government once came to his home. And they said, where are the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, who are the companions of Al-Kadhim and of Al-Rida? He said, I don't know what you're talking about. It is stated that he was taken to prison. For a decade, he was in and out of jail under the Abbasid government, but never gave up one of these advices, one of these words, one of the companions of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. It is stated that when he was taken to prison initially, he told his sister, all of these ahadith that I've compiled, hide them somewhere, bury them somewhere. So when I get out, I'll be able to collect them and show them to the Imam and let him confirm which is valid and which is not. It is stated that when Muhammad ibn Abi Umair, he exits from prison and he returns back to his home, he goes to his sister, and they dig up where he had written down all of these traditions, only to realize that a lot of it was damaged by rain. And the Imam and Muhammad ibn Abi Umair did his best to try to put everything together. If you take a look further later on, generationally, you see that those who were the narrators of the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, who would be killed, they were imprisoned for life. Their families were abused. Again, all so that we remember, reflect, study this legacy that Imam as-Sadiq left. My dear friends, let's not take this tradition of ours for granted. This Imam alayhi salam, who had that sense of knowledge and who gave everything that he gave, again, he realized that also with it came some consequences. Which is why I say that when Abu Ja'far al-Mansur al-Dawaniqi, he ascended toward the position of the Abbasid Caliph, he did everything that he could to minimize and to isolate Asbab, to the extent that he appoints Malik ibn Anas, and he tells him to write a book of hadith, famously known as Muwatta. Also, amongst the reasons and the intentions was that Abu Ja'far al-Mansur wanted to curate and wanted to create a sense of positionality around the ahadith of some of the Sahaba, to the neglect and to the detriment of as-Sadiq. And it is stated that every possible opportunity that he got, al-Mansur al-Dawaniqi tried to do certain things that would push away or dim the light of as-Sadiq. It is stated that, for instance, on one occasion, that he sent some of his guards to the house of Imam as-Sadiq. And he tied the Imam to the neck, and they began to drag him on the street. And he would state, what is my crime? And they would state that you were seeking toward waging some revolution against the government. And they would enter into the house of Ja'far as-Sadiq. They would enter into his room, they would see a prayer mat, and they would see a mushaf, a copy of the whole Quran. They would return him back home. Other opportunities that they had, they went to the house of the Imam, like many of you are familiar, and there were numerous attempts at burning the house of the Imam. And it is stated that one day, after one of those attempts, the Imam ﷺ was standing outside of his home. He was really overwhelmed with grief. His companion comes to him and says, "Oh, Ja'far ibn Muhammad, why do we see you weeping like this? Why do you weep like this?" He says, "They just tried to burn my home." His companion, he says, "Oh my Imam, Maulana, what are you talking about? They burned your home many a time. Why is it today that I see you grieve like this?" To which the Imam alayhi salam, he says that when they put out fire on my home this time, there was some women and there was children. And as they were running to evacuate the home, I was remembering my grandmother, I was remembering the children of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on the night of the 11th of Muharram. As Umar ibn Sa'd calls out, that go and light fire toward the homes of the disbelievers. Every opportunity that Abu Ja'far al-Mansur al-Dawaniqi had toward isolating the Imam, he did just that until he could not handle the Imam anymore. So he inflicted some poison on Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. And the Imam alayhi salam was so overwhelmed on a day like today, 25th of the month of Shawwal. As that poison began to inflict his body, he began to recite his last shahadatain. He began to call out, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasulah." as he was gasping for his last breaths of air. But I tell you, O Ja'far ibn Muhammad, on that day, that you had your family next to you, you had your companions with you. The entire city of Medina was weeping and was grieving over you. You had someone to wash your body. You had someone to perform your ghusl. You had someone to wrap your kafan around your body. But on the 10th of Muharram, your grandfather, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, was left all alone on the plains of Karbala, without any kafan, without any ghusl, but rather only with the wounds of horses traveling. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to breathe in our hearts, to allow for us to resemble the life, to grant us a life that resembles the life of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and to grant us a death that resembles the death of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to give out of ourselves and out of our wealth and our time. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reflect upon the legacy of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, its forefathers and his children, برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين ورحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة فبفضل والصلاة محمد وعلى